Katherine, it's so great to be here with you today.
Thank you for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Of course, me too. So why don't you take me back to the beginning and tell me about what experience or insight made you want to found SRTX?
Well, that is going back quite a while, I'd say. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Just from the time I was growing up, the idea of having something that I was building myself was just always appealing to me. And from the time I was in high school, I was planning events for entrepreneurs. I was trying all of these little things that never really got off the ground, but I'd say that they were the seeds for what I eventually did. But then when it comes to the actual SRTX idea, I had come off my last business, which was an e-commerce platform, which sold to a very, very large hardware company. So they did connected devices like the connected table, watch, oven, like all those types of things, with really, really big brands. And I had had this opportunity to work in manufacturing, but I'd become pretty jaded, honestly, because so many of the things I was working on were what I considered technology for technology's sake. They were things that were interesting and very smart people had built them, but they weren't solving any specific problem for the consumer. And when I was going into my next thing, I was like, I just want to start with a problem first and see what technologies could solve that. And tights caught my attention almost because it was so boring and so bizarre. It was like, how do we have self-driving cars? How do we have space travel, but we don't have a pair of tights that can get through the day? And it sent me down this rabbit hole of polymers and knits, and within about 6 months, I was just certain there was a way that we could do this better.
So tell me about how it's different than just the tights that I would buy at a drugstore that tend to rip after one use.
Well, so tights typically are made with some sort of elastane or spandex and a nylon. And both of those materials, when they're made thin enough for tights, and tights really do use some of the finest fibers in the world, they just don't have the tensile strength to hold up to any amount of force. That's why your tights rip. And the basic hypothesis behind SRTX was, what if we could find a stronger base fiber and that would make stronger tights? And I started ordering basically all of the fibers that exist on the market. I'd get a spool sent to my house and I would wrap it around my finger and I'd see if I could snap the fiber. And if I could snap it, I was like, nope, this won't work, because I would obviously be able to rip the tights. And I went through so many different fibers until I realized if we keep looking at the conventional fibers used in apparel, we'll probably get the conventional answer. And I went online and I was like, okay, well, what is the strongest polymer in the world? Because if that can't solve this problem, then nothing will. And that's how I stumbled upon ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. And at the time, it was really only used in ballistics, climbing equipment, extreme high performance applications. And I ended up reaching out to the suppliers of this crazy polymer and was like, can you just send me a spool of the thinnest version you have? And they ended up sending me a spool that cost me $2,000. It took me a month to convince them to ship it off to some random girl in Canada who wanted to buy one single spool. So we got this $2,000 spool of fiber, shipped it off to a factory, and we're just like, please throw this on your machine, send it back to us, let us know what happens. And they ended up putting it on their machine, and it broke all of the machines. We got this angry note back saying that, we'll send you this one piece, but please don't call us again. And we ended up getting this piece back, and it was so insanely strong. It became a party trick, and I was just like showing all my friends how crazy it was you couldn't rip this. And you get fire pokers that couldn't go through it. And that's when I realized if we could figure out how to make it thinner, how to color it, how to get it to work on these machines, we really had something interesting here.
That's really cool. So now, what I think is interesting is that you said, it's not the most sexy industry, tights. It's for women. How did you get, venture capitalists, predominantly male, to take a chance on you and give you some funding?
Well, I thought it would be easier than it actually was. So this was my second startup or second venture-backed company. And I was like, I raised $1 million last time. This one will be so easy. And I would take those little cheesecloth prototypes to my little investor meetings, just being like, I only want, a couple $100,000. This will be really simple. And I would get these blank stares across the table being like, what are you showing me? This is not a pair of tights. And even with my best friends that were also entrepreneurs and did a little angel investing, the conversation would have to turn partway through. It went from pitching to like, okay, please, just like give it a shot. I know you don't believe. I know it's hard to imagine. Just please give me a shot, because if you invest, then someone else might invest, and you can like start the the snowball. And that's really how that first round came together. It was a little bit more me on my hands and knees, very friends and family asking for that financing. But I'd say there were two major turning points. One, at the end of that friends and family round, we were able to get Joe Mimran, who's the founder of Club Monaco, to invest. And he, looking back, says, I can't believe I invested. Looked like a crazy person with those terrible samples. But he knew that he didn't want to be the one to miss out on Unbreakable Tights if it could work. And getting his credibility behind it really helped. And then we got into Y Combinator within, I think it was the first 8 months of starting the business. And that stamp of approval saying, this is not just, a fashion idea, this is a technology company, really grew our credibility in the investment world. And then we were very lucky that Founders Fund came on board. Cyan Bannister from Founders Fund at the time, now her own venture firm, Long Journey Ventures, really saw this and what it could become. And her putting her stamp of approval on it kind of just got the rest of our early round started. And we've been able to, I think, every round of financing get a little bit better at fundraising dynamics, getting better at telling the story, painting the vision. But 100 meetings, you might get one that goes well. It's not an easy process to raise money for any company, let alone a company that is as capital intensive as what we're trying to do, because we're building the whole infrastructure, but also in an industry that was for a very long time overlooked.
And how much have you raised to date?
150 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I was searching for new tights, I found you via social media. All my Gen Z employees say they found you via social media. So clearly your marketing is working. Talk to me about your strategy on social media and how that's helped grow your brand.
Everything that we have done to grow the brand has been by trial and error. So in the early days, I didn't even know about launching new products and sales as ways of boosting transactions. Every single thing was us staring at the sales numbers and being like, how do we grow this? Because we need to grow it to get the cost to produce this down. And so we would just try everything, whether that was in the early days trying PR, trying email marketing, trying Facebook ads for the first time, then moving on to TikTok and moving on to even LinkedIn advertising. Like we just would try whatever it was to see what would stick. And funnily enough, Facebook advertising at the time, we tried it probably 3 times before it could actually start working for us. So we also learned that going after one tactic doesn't mean that that's the last time you try going after that tactic. You can try it again and try it a different way and try it a different way. So we're an extremely iterative team. Very much so digital advertising became the bread and butter of how we grew the brand. And it's really in the last couple of years that we started to branch out from that, going into out of home, doing some pop-up shops, so that people that aren't on that channel can start to experience us as well. And at this point, we've grown to being the #1 selling product in the US, but we've noticed that we're going to have to now do the same thing in Europe and other markets in the world to introduce the technology, because my goal isn't that we become the #1 brand in tights. I really want to be the #1 technology in tights. So the same way that in the 1940s, nylon was introduced through tights and became just this incredibly pervasive product category, then spandex was introduced into tights in the 1950s. And now both of those things, both spandex and nylon, are probably in most of the things you're wearing today. We want ultraviolet grade polyethylene to start by first taking over the entire tights category, and we're doing that right now through private label partnerships. You can find us in H&M stores powered by ShareTex. You can find us in Swedish stockings. You can really find us sort of across the board right now, and coming to the fall, it'll be much, much more pervasive with some deals we have coming up. But we want to then take it from being pervasive in tights to being in everything you wear, making things more durable, making them longer lasting. So this is a very long vision for everyone to take the company, but it starts with becoming the materials company for the next era of textiles. So how do we create better, circular, more durable textiles, starting with tights and then eventually into more categories?
That's really interesting. Now, one last question for you. You're a 2-time founder, you said. What lessons did you learn from your first company that you took into then here at SRTX?
Yeah, so two-time founder worth talking about. There's lots of other things that I have tried that are potentially not worth talking about. So I think that that's maybe one of the main lessons, is that you have to try a lot of things and not give up. Perseverance is by far, I think, the most important trait for an entrepreneur. The number of times in this SRTX journey where we probably should have quit, like everything was stacked against us, there's no reason it should have kept going. We would keep just finding that solution to, keep you in business one more day, get it into one more consumer's hand, get one more investor, and not being willing to give up and sort of seeing the path through, I think, is so, so important. I'd also say that surrounding myself with other entrepreneurs has been so important to my journey. It is a roller coaster mentally to start a business, and having that network of other people that have been there, done that, and that you can call up and they can either be there to share your pain or to give you that word that you need to really go on to the next step. Both of those things have been just so important to me as a founder.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.